Okay, let's unpack this. We are about to deep dive into one of the most unexpected yet meticulously documented sets of sources we've ever encountered on this show.
Really is something else.
Today, we're focusing on the 1920s writings of the Vietnamese revolutionary Ho Chi Minh, specifically his collected essays published under the title The Black Race.
And the mission of this deep dive is just so compelling because we are uncovering a critique of systemic racial oppression that was laid out almost a century ago. It's a critique that spanned continents.
Right. He connects the terror of American lynching to the brutal economic engine of European colonialism in Africa.
It's a stunning piece of internationalist reporting for sure, but it also functions as sort of a historical blueprint for understanding modern globalized racism.
And the power of these sources, I think, comes from the fact that this wasn't just some side project for him. We have this absolutely foundational quote from 1924 where Ho Chi Minh writes,
It's so stark.
"It is well known that the black race is the most oppressed and most exploited of the human family." Now, just think about the context for a second.
Hmm.
Here is a future national liberation leader, totally dedicated to freeing Vietnam, yet he's putting substantial political and literary energy during his early revolutionary period into documenting African and African American suffering.
And that fact is hugely significant. It shows he immediately grasped that the struggle against French imperialism in Indochina was not some, isolated regional conflict.
No, not at all.
He saw it was deeply interconnected with the broader global project of white supremacy and colonial extraction. He wasn't just synthesizing academic theories. He was seeing a single, monstrous, interconnected system of exploitation operating globally.
Exactly. And that, I think, is the unique value for you, the listener, today. This deep dive provides a rare, non-Western, internationalist perspective on the history of institutional racism.
And it's all structured around his personal observations and his detailed source-backed reporting.
It's a shortcut not just to historical knowledge, but to understanding the foundational economic and political mechanisms that underpinned global institutional racism in the 20th century.
Let's get into it.
So, to truly appreciate the sharpness of his analysis, we have to establish Ho Chi Minh's background as an international witness. Born in 1890, he wasn't a static theorist sitting in a library.
Not even close. He left Vietnam in 1911 and spent the next 30 years traveling the world, specifically searching for the intellectual and political tools to liberate his homeland from French colonial rule.
And this global journey took him directly into the nexus of American and European racial politics. It gave him a front-row seat to all these different manifestations of systemic oppression.
Crucially, the sources detail his time in the United States. He lived and worked in Boston, specifically at the Parker House Hotel, and later spent significant time in New York.
His time in New York is just fascinating. We're talking the 1910s, early 1920s. Harlem was rapidly becoming the epicenter of Black political thought, the Cultural Renaissance, revolutionary action.
The place to be.
And our sources indicate that Ho Chi Minh was deeply plugged into this environment. He was attending meetings of the Universal Negro Improvement Association, the UNIA.
And that detail, the UNIA, that places him directly within the most radical wing of the Pan-African movement of the time. This isn't a passive observation.
Explain that. What does that mean exactly?
Well, the UNIA, founded by Marcus Garvey, was championing Pan-African nationalism, Black self-reliance, and even the Back to Africa movement. It was a global vision.
So Ho Chi Minh wasn't just, watching from the sidelines.
No. He was linking up with figures who saw the Black struggle as a global anti-colonial fight. He was in the room where these ideas were being forged.
And this intellectual exchange wasn't lost on later generations. It's often noted that American political thinkers and activists saw these clear connections between his global anti-colonial stance and the fiery internationalism of figures like Malcolm X decades later.
Well, they shared a common understanding, didn't they? That oppression in Asia, in Africa, in America, it was all fundamentally linked by the economic interests of a white ruling class.
But his dedication to this cause wasn't purely academic or theoretical. It was cemented by a personal, devastating experience, which the sources highlight as a core revelation for him.
Yes, he recounts this anecdote from a ship journey that stopped in Dakar, Senegal, a location, by the way, historically infamous as a major departure point for the Atlantic slave trade. The historical weight of the place is already immense.
And this incident is just so chilling because it perfectly encapsulates the casual, arbitrary cruelty of the colonial mindset he was fighting against.
So what happened?
He was aboard the vessel when French colonists on shore needed the ship's moorings secured, but the waters were notoriously choppy and everyone knew they were shark-infested,
Oh.
and they ordered 4 African men to swim out to the boat to perform the task.
The outcome was predictably tragic. The 4 men drowned. They were pulled under by the currents, the dangers of the water, a loss compounded by the absolute indifference of the people watching.
That's the part that gets you. The source material emphasizes this horrific detail. The French colonists simply burst out laughing at the deaths of the very men they had just ordered into harm's way.
Laughing.
Laughter. And that reaction, the indifference, the laughter, the complete stripping away of human value, it became a political bedrock for him. He concluded, as recounted in the sources, "The French in France are good, but the French colonists are cruel and inhuman. It is the same everywhere."
That is such a critical political insight. It's not just a statement of moral disgust, right? It's the realization that the system of colonialism fundamentally corrupts the human soul. It strips humanity from the oppressors themselves.
That's a great point. It's the environment.
It's the environment, the power structure designed for extraction that breeds this specific type of casual brutality. Doesn't matter if the colonist comes from France or Belgium or Britain.
It is the same everywhere.
Exactly.
And this personal revelation really explains why his focus on global Black suffering was so sustained. This wasn't a sudden political stunt. It was a consistent intellectual focus for him.
You see it in his early works, written between 1922 and 1924, even before the collected volume The Black Race was published. He wrote these key essays detailing crimes against African Americans like lynching from 1924 and the Ku Klux Klan.
So even while living in Europe, he's meticulously documenting the shocking realities of racism in the United States.
Yes, and in doing so, he's demonstrating that American racial terror was just as much a part of the global imperial system as the French treatment of Vietnamese or Senegalese people. This sustained documentation proves that the unity of the anti-colonial, anti-racist struggle was central to his revolutionary philosophy from the very beginning.
So, having personally witnessed that cruelty in Dakar and immersed himself in the resistance movements in Harlem, Ho Chi Minh didn't just write about the present. He rooted this cruelty in centuries of sanctioned violence.
Which brings us to his essay, The Civilization That Kills.
The title itself is the core argument, isn't it?
It is. Ho Chi Minh completely inverted the entire European narrative of progress and expansion. He argued that the European colonial project and the resulting oppression and exploitation of Black people were crimes committed precisely in the name of civilization.
So this supposedly enlightened Christian civilization was, in his view,
The most efficient killing machine in history.
He immediately takes us back to the genesis of the system, arguing that the moment white Europeans landed on African shores, the history of the continent became one where the soil was consistently drenched in blood.
And one of the most intellectually shocking points he makes is detailing the role of religion in sanctifying this violence. He argues that the mass murders, the trade in human beings, they were blessed by the church.
Blessed by the church, and that slavery itself was sanctioned, authorized, and codified by kings and parliaments.
It was an institutional, integrated, top-down operation. This wasn't some rogue business venture by a few bad apples.
And to drive this point home, he uses specific historical examples of this unholy alliance. He references the Spanish conquistadors operating from 1442 onward, focusing on the knights of the most Catholic king of Spain.
Right, and he notes that their evangelism was mixed seamlessly with massacres and commerce.
How so?
We see this horrifying merger in their own logbooks. They claimed they carried out their apostolate, saying they would be recompensed for their expenditures and acquire laurels for their work with the capture of 165 men, women, and children. The spiritual reward and the material reward were viewed as interchangeable products of the same enterprise.
But the blurring of spiritual devotion and brutal commerce is best crystallized in that one shocking detail Ho Chi Minh pulled from the historical record: the inventory of property confiscated from Jesuits in Brazil in 1768.
I mean, that inventory list, it's just breathtaking. It lists items essential to worship and faith, salvation crosses, objects of devotion, and right alongside them,
What?
the tools required for managing human beings as chattel, irons for branding slaves. It wasn't just that the church tolerated slavery. The specific infrastructure of human bondage was literally supported and owned by the religious institutions themselves. That level of synthesis by Ho Chi Minh is what makes this such a profound political document.
And beyond the church, the state complicity was absolute, a fact he documents systematically. He lists European monarchs who personally engaged in or authorized the slave trade.
Charles V, Leopold II, King of the Belgians, even Queen Elizabeth of England.
These weren't peripheral figures. These were the crown heads of Europe signing treaties and granting monopolies for the exploitation of black flesh.
And we have the concrete governmental contracts he cited, which illustrate that this was state policy. Take the agreement on August 27, 1701. The Spanish crown, under the authority of His Most Catholic Majesty of Spain and His Most Christian Majesty of France, grants the Royal Company of Guinea a 10-year monopoly for Negro traffic in the colonies of America.
And this wasn't just a Spanish or French operation either, was it?
No, Ho Chi Minh points out that His Britannic Majesty undertook to supply Spanish America with 144,000 Indians of both sexes and all ages, in exchange for a specific payment of 33 piastre crowns per head. This was international diplomacy centered entirely on the high-level transaction of human beings.
This systemic trade leads us directly to the horror of the Middle Passage, and Ho Chi Minh uses these devastating statistics to convey the scale of the atrocity.
He estimates over 15 million Negros were transported to America. 15 million. And of that number, a staggering 3 million died or drowned during the journey.
1 in 5.
At least. It's just unimaginable.
And the conditions he details are systematic and sickening. They were designed for maximum commercial efficiency, not human survival.
He describes arrested black people chained in pairs' necks, arms, legs, or in groups of 20 or 30, forced into holes with virtually no room, no light, no air. He emphasizes the extreme desperation that drove the enslaved to turn on one another.
And then there was this grotesque daily ritual they called dancing for the sake of health.
It's so perverse. They were forced to dance on the deck, often twice a day, but only under the motivation of a rain of lashings and whips administered by the crew.
The conditions were so brutal that Ho Chi Minh recounts incidents where men strangled each other out of sheer misery, and women drove nails into their neighbors' skulls.
The human mind just breaks under that kind of pressure.
And when it came to the ultimate dehumanization, the source material describes the chilling criteria for disposal.
The unsaleable goods.
Exactly. As a rule, the sick, the damaged, and the unsaleable goods, which disturbingly meant living but commercially undesirable slaves, were simply thrown into the sea.
The document suggests that a quarter of the cargo often succumbed to infectious diseases or asphyxiation before ever even reaching shore.
And the survivors?
The surviving slaves were then branded and numbered with white-hot irons, treated entirely as bulk commodities. Ho Chi Minh cites examples, like the Portuguese Company of Guinea, which had a contract to supply 11,000 tons of Negroes in 1700.
Not people, tons.
Tons. The transition from human being to weight on a balance sheet is complete.
No, the way Ho Chi Minh transitions from the slave trade to the subsequent era of colonization is absolutely central to his political theory. And it provides a crucial analytical bridge for us today.
It's maybe the most important argument in the whole collection.
He argues that this infamous trade ended in 1850 not because of some sudden enlightened wave of European morality.
Right, but because it was superseded by colonization, which became slavery on a larger, more systemic, and ultimately more profitable scale.
Let's slow down and analyze that. This is the key insight.
Direct chattel slavery, while profitable, was inefficient. It was also, morally difficult to justify in the age of emerging liberalism. Colonization, however, was a modernized form of extraction.
How so?
Instead of buying and owning the worker outright, the colonizers seized the land and the resources, and then they compelled the native population to work through taxation, forced labor, military violence. It was a system of new slavery.
And he backs this assertion up with horrifying examples of colonial brutality that prove the new system was just as reliant on terror as the old one. He stresses these are not exceptional, isolated cases.
No, they are systemic tools of governance. Consider the example of the French trader in Madagascar who, suspecting a theft, tortured numerous native employees with electricity, only to find later that his own son was the culprit.
Or the account of a colonial administrator who forced a black woman to remain in the burning sun for a whole day with a heavy heated stone on her head.
Before tying her down and pouring molten rubber into her genitals, the level of premeditated, inventive cruelty is just. It's difficult to absorb.
And then there are the high-level military atrocities. The atrocities become almost unbelievable in their scope and scale. A French writer recounted seeing a French colonel in Algeria order 30 captured Arabs to be put to death without investigation or trial.
And their sentence was to be buried naked up to their necks in the sand, their heads exposed to the sun so they wouldn't die too quickly.
The graphic detail Ho Chi Minh includes is so purposeful. He details how their eyelids swelled, their eyes started from their sockets, their tongues filled their horribly gaping mouths. He was designing this to force his European readers to confront the barbarity being committed in their name.
And he couples this physical horror with the financial figures.
Yeah.
This is crucial to demonstrate the ultimate motive, profit.
He details the massive depopulation of exploited regions right alongside the wealth generated. He cites that from 1783 to 1793, the Liverpool Company alone made over £1 million sterling in profit from the slave trade.
And the colonial system simply scaled this extraction up. In just 9 years, King Leopold II received an astonishing £3,179,120 from the exploitation of the Congo.
And the human cost of that profit.
Apocalyptic. In the French Congo, the population dropped from 8.5 million in 1908 to, well, 40,000 tribes just disappeared by 1911. The Hottentot population fell from 20,000 to 9,700 over just 7 years of colonization.
And crucially, these were not accidental deaths. Ho Chi Minh meticulously documents the massacres that were set forward as explicit political principles of governance. These weren't random acts of violence.
No, this was policy. He lists the specific policies of extermination. The English massacring 3,000 Matabele rebels in 1895. The Germans massacring over 25,000 Herreros between 1901 and 1906.
And the Italians massacring 4,000 natives in Machia in 1911 in the suburbs of Machia during 3 days of what he calls slaughterhouse violence.
This was the explicit policy of extermination. He quotes one European government declaring the principle: if the natives allow themselves to slip into disobedience or rebellion, they will be mercilessly swept out of the country. Other peoples will take their place.
That's the true face of the civilization that kills.
So having established that state-sanctioned institutional violence of European colonialism, Ho Chi Minh then pivots to the United States. He wants to demonstrate that the same core mechanisms of economic terror were at work there.
And he focuses on what he called the most cruel and horrible customs spreading across the American Union: lynching.
He labels this practice a little-known aspect of American civilization, inflicted by what he termed the American rabble, but secretly sanctioned by the ruling class.
Right. He opens his essay, Lynching, from 1924, by noting the continued atrocious moral and material sufferings of African Americans, and he links the spread of lynching directly back to the illegal practices of the old slave trade and the earliest forms of the Ku Klux Klan.
And the sources reveal that he meticulously compiled details on the violence and the spectacle of it. He was aiming to shock his European readers into recognizing American hypocrisy.
He describes the victim being dragged by a horde, covered in flammable material, and then burned, shot, and mutilated.
It was a horrific public spectacle, wasn't it? Treated almost like a national holiday in some areas.
He details how the victim would be secured to a tree, often doused in kerosene, and burned. While waiting for the fire, the crowd would go out of their way to inflict more pain, smashing teeth, tearing out tufts of hair, carrying away pieces of flesh and skull.
And what's truly terrifying is the crowd's disposition. Ho Chi Minh analyzes this as a sign of institutional rot. After the victim was burned and mutilated, the rope holding the corpse would often be cut into small pieces and sold.
For $3 or $5 each.
Sought after by ladies as souvenirs and lucky charms.
Souvenirs.
The crowd, treating the event as a form of popular justice, would then stream slowly and cheerfully away, casually making appointments for the next time.
The statistics he provides just underscore the endemic nature of this practice. This wasn't sporadic crime. It was a systematic, ongoing terror campaign.
He documents 2,600 black people lynched between 1889 and 1919. That figure includes 51 women and girls, and grimly, 10 former soldiers who had just fought in the Great War overseas.
And in 1919 alone, 78 black people were lynched, 11 of whom were burned alive.
But here is where Ho Chi Minh's analysis moves beyond just, documenting brutality. He argues that the motivation was rarely the crime alleged, but deeper economic forces.
Right. He stresses that the alleged crimes were merely pretexts. The core motive was economic jealousy.
He saw lynching as a calculated tactic. As black workers in the South started gaining prosperity, maybe accumulating land or opening successful small businesses, they needed to be terrorized.
And this economic violence, encouraged by local elites, prevented black workers from exploiting their economic potential. It kept them in a dependent, low-wage labor pool.
In short, he asserts these actions were actively incited, encouraged, and spurred on by politicians, financiers, and authorities in the reactionary press as a deliberate measure to keep black workers exploited and wages depressed in the post-Reconstruction South. It's a purely materialist critique of racial terror.
And the most damning evidence he presents is the role of the media in inciting this violence. This proves state normalization. He provides actual quotes from newspaper headlines that advertise the event.
The one from June 26, 1919, the New Orleans States, published a front-page headline in 5-inch letters, 3,000 will burn Negro.
I mean, advertising it.
And similarly, the Jackson Daily News ran a large-type article saying, John Hartfield will be lynched by Ellisville mob at 5 o'clock this afternoon.
And Ho Chi Minh adds that crucial, grim observation that the newspapers neglected to add, that the whole population is earnestly invited to attend.
It wasn't just reported, it was socially sanctioned and publicly advertised.
He further supports this with the anecdote of JM, who was tortured with a red-hot crowbar and burned in front of 2,000 people, including women and children.
And the crowd treated the horrific scene like entertainment. Ho Chi Minh quotes sources describing how social classes, women and children were present at the scene, with ladies of high society joining the crowd from neighboring terraces to contend for pieces of the victim's corpse.
This suggests a profound moral breakdown in the white community, one that was actively nurtured by the state and media.
And from there, he moves to the systemic organized terror. He dissects the Ku Klux Klan.
He details the origin of the old Klan in May 1866 in Tennessee, formed by young men after the Civil War. Their goal was straightforward: reestablishing the supremacy of the white race following the emancipation of the slaves.
The old Klan was essentially the enforcement arm for the agrarian and slaveholding bourgeoisie in the South. They used terror to retain control over the newly freed black population.
However, Ho Chi Minh focuses more intensely on the new Klan, which surged in popularity during his time in America and Europe.
Right, the new Klan. Founded in October 1915 by William Joseph Simmons, it was far more ambitious. While its explicit platform was 100% Americanism, it was aggressively anti-Catholic, anti-Semite, anti-worker, and of course, anti-Negro. It expanded its terror far beyond the old Confederacy.
And this resurgence is vital context for the 1920s. Ho Chi Minh frames it as occurring during the second emancipation period after World War I.
Exactly. Black soldiers had fought for democracy abroad and came home expecting the civil and social rights they'd been promised. The Klan emerged specifically to bar the freed people's way to a dignified social and economic life at home.
And their criminal activity was meticulously documented by Ho Chi Minh.
He notes records showing more than 80 beatings and 96 lynchings in the state of Texas alone in 1 year. They flourished particularly in Georgia, Mississippi, Texas, and Alabama, often operating with complete impunity.
And he highlights a particularly insidious tactic that proved their high-level collusion with state authorities.
Attacking or pulling Negroes out of jails to be lynched while they were in official custody. He cites instances across Georgia, Alabama, Mississippi, and Texas, demonstrating that state power often worked in tandem with, or actively submitted to, Klan terrorism.
But he doesn't end on a note of pure despair. He concludes the section on the KKK by discussing the seeds of its decline in the early 1920s.
He cites 4 key reasons for its impending disappearance, which shows he was not just documenting suffering, but analyzing the mechanics of resistance and failure.
And the first reason is crucial. Black people started fighting back.
Yes. He cites the riot in Washington in July 1919, where black residents refused to be murdered with impunity. They stood up to the Klan and the white mob. This act of self-defense forced a fundamental change in the dynamic of power.
And second,
the new Klan's excesses and financial scandals started shocking the public. Even traditionally conservative bourgeois newspapers began attacking the organization. Public shock over their barbarity, coupled with internal financial corruption among the leadership, drove away many moderate supporters.
The third reason points to their overwhelming, self-defeating opposition.
Right. The KKK's 100% Americanism doctrine arrayed itself against an impossibly large coalition: 20 million Catholics, 3 million Jews, 20 million foreigners, and 12 million Negroes, plus the entire organized working class of America. Ho Chi Minh recognized that their ideology was simply too broad in its hatred to maintain unified support.
And the final reason ties directly back to his core materialist perspective: economics.
The Great Migration. The large-scale emigration of Negroes from the agricultural South to the industrial North caused a massive shortage of labor. This threatened financial ruin for the Southern planters, who were the Klan's financial base. This movement of labor reduced the supply and harmed the very power structure that financed the Klan's existence. It shows that economic shifts could undermine racial terrorism.
Now we shift from the overt, brutal violence we've documented in America and the colonies back to Europe, specifically France, where Ho Chi Minh had lived and worked.
And he uses a famous 1922 sporting event, a boxing match, to demonstrate that this racial oppression was just as insidious, if more subtle and hypocritical, in the European metropolitan centers.
This was the World Middleweight Championship fight between battling Siki and Georges Carpentier. Siki was of Senegalese origin, representing the colonial world.
And Carpentier was the celebrated French boxer, representing the metropolitan civilized world. The stakes were incredibly high, both nationally and racially.
And the match itself was a massive upset. Siki won, he knocked Carpentier down and took the championship title.
Initially, as Ho Chi Minh documents, the French public celebrated the victory. He was treated like a hero, a symbol of French colonial power, and the idea that its subjects could rise to global prominence.
But Ho Chi Minh was deeply cynical about this initial public enthusiasm, wasn't he?
Completely. He argued that the official support for Siki was merely propaganda. French colonial policy needed to celebrate Siki, a glorious citizen of the empire, to create an image of success and opportunity for the young generation in their colonies. It was just a PR exercise.
But the celebration was short-lived, and the backlash quickly exposed the underlying racial prejudice.
Yes. Siki was later disgraced and jailed for 9 months, subsequently banned completely from boxing rings in France. And the official reason cited was so vague, it was almost farcical.
For having railed at Mr. Cooney.
Railed at Mr. Cooney. What's fascinating is Ho Chi Minh's analysis of that subtle shift to institutional prejudice. Siki's triumph, a black colonial subject defeating a white French hero, was a victory that could not be sustained in the long term, even in the realm of sport. He was an acceptable symbol only so long as he adhered to the expectations of his race.
So that charge, railing at Mr. Cooney, is just a political smokescreen.
Entirely. Ho Chi Minh dissects it, arguing that if a white Frenchman had shown similar exuberance or chauvinism, it would have been instantly excused as spirited national pride. But Siki was punished, jailed, and professionally destroyed for a trivial offense.
He concludes that Siki was never truly forgiven for defeating a white man.
He states it plainly. Siki, a black, will never be forgiven for having defeated Carpentier, a white, and if Carpentier bears no grudge, the chauvinism of others does. This exposed the fundamental lie of French integration.
And this incident was so crucial for Ho Chi Minh because it showed that the principle of equality between races was only a vague humanitarian notion used for rhetoric, not an actual policy of the state.
The moment a black individual achieved a victory that challenged the core premise of white supremacy, that white athletes, white culture, white people were superior, the system moved to destroy him.
The French officials and public opinion exposed their true feelings.
The black champion was only useful as propaganda before his win. But once he broke the unwritten social code by proving his superiority over the white champion, he had to be destroyed. This demonstrates how racism in the metropole operates not through lynching, but through institutional character assassination and professional banishment.
It's the same mechanism of control, just applied differently.
Precisely.
So we see the complete circle in his analysis, from the casual, lethal cruelty in the colonies, like in Dakar, to the systemic economic terror in America with lynching and the KKK, and finally, to the insidious, subtle institutional destruction applied when the color line is challenged in the European capital with Siki.
All different tactics serving the same core system of white supremacy and economic control.
This deep dive into Ho Chi Minh's 1920s writings is just startling, not just for the wealth of historical documentation, but because it forces us to recognize the deep, unified historical roots of modern systemic oppression.
He connected the dots between Spanish conquistadors branding slaves, Belgian profiteering in the Congo, American politicians inciting lynch mobs, and French chauvinism destroying a champion.
His work, The Black Race, serves as this powerful synthesis of global white supremacy. It demonstrates that the economic motive was always the driving force, expertly cloaked in the veneer of civilization and often blessed by religious institutions.
He didn't view these as separate problems. He saw them as symptoms of a single global structure. And as the editors of this source material note, the message of Ho Chi Minh's work resonates so profoundly today.
How so?
Well, the contemporary international struggle known as Black Lives Matter, which has spread from America globally, echoes the systemic issues he meticulously documented almost a century ago, the demand that state institutions be held accountable for the violence they sanction or ignore.
It is a powerful reminder that history is not past, it is present. It's also worth mentioning that Ho Chi Minh's lifelong devotion to these principles earned him international recognition.
From UNESCO.
In 1987, UNESCO adopted a resolution recognizing him as a Vietnamese hero of national liberation and great man of culture, specifically acknowledging his devotion to the development of humanity, democracy, and social progress.
His writings really demonstrated that the struggle against white supremacy and exploitation was a unified global battle. It spanned multiple continents and political forms, from chattel slavery to the new slavery of colonization to institutionalized terror. He laid out a blueprint for international solidarity long before many of these independence struggles truly ignited.
So, as we wrap up this comprehensive deep dive, we want to leave you with this provocative thought. Ho Chi Minh meticulously documented the global structures of oppression as they existed nearly 100 years ago. He identified the common thread of economic exploitation and state complicity.
Today, as we watch mass movements demanding justice, we have to consider what modern global structures currently enforce systemic oppression, perhaps cloaked in the language of globalization or development aid or border control.
And where must the most crucial international solidarity movements focus their efforts next? What are the new forms of exploitation operating today that require a Ho Chi Minh level of meticulous international documentation?